They thought they had you cornered, every move calculated, every word twisted, every door quietly closed behind you. But what they didn't count on was your awareness. You saw the patterns, you felt the shift, you read between the lines when others would have stayed blind. And now they're furious. Not because you failed, but because you didn't. Because the trap didn't break you, it exposed them. See, people get uncomfortable when their plans stop working, when the person they underestimated starts thinking, moving, and rising differently. You didn't react, you responded, you didn't panic, you paused, and in that moment you took your power back. Let them be angry, let them be shaken, because the truth is, you were never the prey. You were always the one who sees. Awareness beats manipulation. It sounds simple, almost too simple, but in reality, it's one of the most powerful shifts a person can make. Because manipulation doesn't work on strength. It works on blindness. It thrives in confusion, in emotional reactions, in those moments when you don't stop to question what's really happening. And that's where awareness changes everything. The moment you become aware, the moment you start seeing patterns instead of isolated events, the whole game shifts. Think about it. Manipulation often doesn't come loud and obvious. It comes subtle. It comes disguised as concern, as pressure, as urgency. It shows up in repeated behaviors, in conversations that leave you second-guessing yourself, in situations where you feel pushed but can't quite explain why. And if you're not paying attention, you get pulled into it. You react emotionally. You defend yourself. You try to fix things that were designed to confuse you in the first place. That's how the trap closes. But awareness interrupts that cycle. It creates space between what happens and how you respond. Instead of immediately reacting, you start observing. You notice the tone, the timing, the intention behind the words. You ask yourself, why does this feel off? Instead of brushing it aside, and in that pause, you regain control, because manipulation depends on speed. It wants you to react quickly, emotionally, without thinking. Awareness slows everything down. When you become aware, you stop taking everything at face value. You begin to see consistency or the lack of it. You notice when someone's actions don't match their words. You recognize repeated patterns instead of treating every situation like it's new. And that's powerful because patterns don't lie. They reveal intention over time. And once you see that clearly, it becomes very hard for someone to control you the way they used to. There's also a quiet confidence that comes with awareness. You don't feel the need to explain yourself to everyone. You don't rush to prove your point. You don't get easily pulled into arguments that are designed to drain you. Instead, you step back, you watch, you choose your responses carefully, or sometimes you choose not to respond at all. And that's something manipulators struggle with because they rely on your reaction. When you don't give it to them, their strategy starts to fall apart. Awareness also strengthens your intuition. That inner voice that tells you something isn't right, it becomes clearer, louder, more reliable. Before, you might have ignored it or doubted it. Now you listen, you trust it, and more often than not, it guides you away from situations that don't serve you. It helps you recognize when someone's energy feels off, even if their words sound convincing. That's not overthinking, that's clarity. And here's the truth. Awareness doesn't mean you become cold or distant. It means you become intentional. You still engage, you still care, but you do it with your eyes open. You understand that not every situation deserves your energy, not every person deserves your trust, and not every conversation needs your reaction. You start protecting your peace, not out of fear, but out of understanding. Over time, this changes how people interact with you. Those who relied on confusion or control will find it harder to influence you. They may even become frustrated because what used to work no longer does, and that's okay. Their frustration is not your responsibility. It's simply a reflection of the fact that you've grown beyond the reach of their tactics. At the end of the day, awareness is not about being perfect or catching everything. It's about being present. It's about paying attention to what's happening around you and within you. It's about trusting yourself enough to question what doesn't feel right. Because once you see clearly, you can't be easily misled. And once you understand the game, you're no longer playing it on someone else's terms. You're choosing your own path. Silence is power. Not the kind of silence that comes from fear or avoidance, but the kind that comes from control, from knowing exactly when to speak and when to hold back. In a world where everyone feels the need to react instantly, to defend themselves, to prove a point, silence becomes something rare And because it's rare, it becomes powerful. Most people underestimate silence. They think if you're not speaking, you're losing. They think if you don't respond, you don't have an answer. But the truth is, silence often says more than words ever could. It creates space. It shifts attention. It forces others to sit with their own thoughts, their own actions, their own words, without you stepping in to carry the weight of the conversation. When someone tries to provoke you, they're looking for a reaction. They want emotion, they want engagement, they want to pull you into their energy. And the moment you react without thinking, you give them exactly what they were aiming for. But when you choose silence instead, something different happens. The dynamic changes. You're no longer playing their game, you're stepping outside of it. Silence also gives you time to think, to process, to understand what's really going on beneath the surface. Not every situation deserves an immediate response. In fact, the most important moments in life often require a pause, because when you respond too quickly, you're usually reacting from emotion, not clarity. And emotion, while real, isn't always accurate. It can be influenced, triggered, even manipulated. But when you stay silent for a moment, you create distance between the situation and your response. You allow yourself to see things more clearly. You start asking better questions. What is really happening here? Why is this being said? What outcome does this person want? And with that clarity, your eventual response, if you choose to give one, comes from a place of strength, not impulse. There's also a certain confidence in silence. You don't feel the need to fill every gap in a conversation. You're comfortable with pauses. You're okay with letting things breathe. That kind of presence is powerful because it shows that you're not seeking validation through constant talking. You're grounded enough to let your actions, your choices, and your energy speak for you. And sometimes silence is protection. Not everything needs to be explained. Not every opinion needs to be shared. There are moments when speaking too much can actually weaken your position. It can reveal more than necessary, give others information they can twist, or pull you deeper into situations that aren't worth your energy. Silence in those moments becomes a boundary. It's important to understand that silence doesn't mean suppression. It doesn't mean you ignore your feelings or avoid important conversations. It means you choose the right time, the right place, and the right way to express yourself. It's intentional, it's measured, it's controlled, and that's what gives it strength. You'll notice that people who rely on chaos often struggle with silence. They become uncomfortable when there's no reaction, no immediate response, no engagement. They may push harder, speak louder, try different angles to get something out of you. But if you remain steady, if you stay grounded in your silence, eventually their tactics lose effectiveness, because without your participation, there's nothing for them to build on. Silence also strengthens your awareness. When you're not constantly talking, you're observing. You're listening more closely, not just to words, but to tone, body language, timing. You pick up on details that others might miss, and those details give you insight. They help you understand people and situations on a deeper level. Over time, you begin to realize that not every battle needs to be fought with words. Some are won simply by not engaging, by stepping back, by choosing peace over proving a point. And that doesn't make you weak, it makes you wise, because you're no longer driven by the need to react. You're guided by the decision to respond with purpose. At its core, silence is about self-control. It's about mastering that internal urge to speak just for the sake of speaking. It's about understanding that your voice carries weight, and because of that, it should be used with intention. When you speak less but mean more, people listen differently. Your words carry more impact because they're not constant, they're deliberate. So don't rush to fill every silence. Don't feel pressured to respond to everything that comes your way. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is say nothing at all, to observe, to understand, and to choose your moment carefully. Because when silence comes from strength, it doesn't weaken you, it elevates you. Observe before you react. It sounds simple, but in real life, it's one of the hardest habits to build, because everything around you is designed to make you react first and think later. A comment hits you the wrong way. A situation feels unfair. Someone pushes your buttons, and your instinct is to respond immediately, to defend yourself, to correct, to push back. But in those first few seconds, you're not responding from clarity. You're reacting from emotion. And emotion, While real can be misleading in the moment, it's fast, intense, and often influenced by past experiences, insecurities, or assumptions. That's why observation matters. It slows everything down. It gives you a chance to step back, even if it's just mentally, and ask yourself what's really happening here. When you start observing, you begin to notice details you would have missed otherwise. You hear not just the words, but the tone behind them. You see not just the action, but the pattern it fits into. You recognize when something is intentional and when it's not. And that awareness gives you an advantage because you're no longer reacting blindly. Think about how many situations escalate simply because people react too quickly. One misunderstanding turns into an argument. One careless comment turns into a conflict. And most of the time, it's not because the situation was that serious. It's because no one paused long enough to understand it. Observation creates that pause. It gives you room to choose your response instead of being controlled by your first impulse. There's also a level of emotional control that comes with observing before reacting. You don't let every situation pull you in. You don't give your energy away so easily. Instead, you stay grounded. You let things unfold a little before deciding how you want to engage. And that kind of control is powerful because it keeps you from being manipulated by external triggers. When you observe, you also start seeing patterns in people. You notice repeated behaviors, consistent reactions, and underlying intentions. Someone who constantly shifts blame, someone who creates confusion, someone who only shows up when it benefits them. These patterns become clearer over time, and once you see them, you're less likely to get caught off guard. You start responding with awareness instead of surprise. Observation also helps you separate facts from assumptions. In the heat of the moment, it's easy to jump to conclusions. You think you know why someone said something, what they meant, what their intentions were, but often those conclusions are based on incomplete information. By observing first, you give yourself the chance to gather more context. You ask questions internally instead of making immediate judgments. Another important part of this is learning to be comfortable with the pause. That space between what happens and how you respond. It might feel uncomfortable at first. You might feel like you're losing control or falling behind. But in reality, that pause is where your power is. It's where you regain control over your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. Over time, observing before reacting becomes a habit. You don't have to force it as much. It becomes your natural way of handling situations. You listen more, you watch more, you think more, and as a result, you respond better. Your words become more intentional, your actions more aligned, and your decisions more thoughtful. People will notice this change. They'll see that you're not easily triggered, not easily pulled into unnecessary drama. And that can be unsettling for those who are used to getting quick reactions out of you. They may push harder at first, trying to get the same response they always did, but when they don't get it, the dynamic shifts. You're no longer predictable, and that makes you harder to influence. It's important to understand that observing doesn't mean staying silent forever or avoiding confrontation. It simply means you choose the right moment and the right way to respond. You're not ignoring the situation, you're understanding it first. And that understanding makes your response more effective when you do decide to speak or act. At its core, observing before reacting is about discipline. It's about training yourself to pause, to think, to see clearly before you move. It's not always easy, especially in emotional situations, but it's worth it. Because once you master that pause, you stop being controlled by the moment, and you start controlling how the moment shapes you. And that's the real shift. You're no longer just reacting to life as it happens. You're engaging with it consciously, intentionally, and with clarity. And that's what separates someone who is easily influenced from someone who is truly in control. Trust your intuition, not blindly, not emotionally, but deeply. Because there's a difference between reacting out of fear and listening to that quiet inner signal that keeps showing up no matter how much you try to ignore it. Intuition doesn't scream, it doesn't rush you, it doesn't demand attention the way fear or ego does. It's subtle, steady, and persistent. It's that feeling you get when something doesn't quite add up, even if everything on the surface looks fine. Most people have felt it at some point. That moment when a situation seemed okay, but something inside said, "Pay attention." And instead of listening, they brushed it off. Maybe they didn't want to seem paranoid. Maybe they didn't have proof. Maybe they trusted the situation more than they trusted themselves. But later, when things unfolded, they realized that feeling was there for a reason. That wasn't overthinking, that was awareness trying to guide them. The problem is we're often taught to doubt that inner voice. We're told to rely only on logic, only on what can be proven, only on what others confirm. And while logic is important, it's not the whole picture. Intuition is built from experience, observation, and subconscious pattern recognition. It picks up on things your conscious mind hasn't fully processed yet. It notices inconsistencies, shifts in tone, changes in behavior, things that don't always register immediately but still matter. Trusting your intuition doesn't mean you stop thinking. It means you start listening to yourself more honestly. It means when something feels off, you don't immediately dismiss it. You pause, you observe, you ask yourself why that feeling is there. You don't need to jump to conclusions, but you also don't ignore the signal. You give it space. There's a certain clarity that comes with trusting your intuition. You stop second-guessing yourself so much. You stop relying entirely on external validation to make decisions. Instead, you begin to balance what you see, what you hear, and what you feel. And when those things don't align, you pay attention, because misalignment is often where the truth is hiding. It's important to understand that intuition is not the same as fear. Fear is loud, urgent, and often based on worst-case scenarios. It pushes you to react quickly, sometimes irrationally. Intuition, on the other hand, is calm. It doesn't rush you, it guides you. It might make you cautious, but it doesn't make you panic. Learning to tell the difference between the two is key, and that comes with practice, with self-awareness, with experience. When you start trusting your intuition, you also become more selective about what you allow into your life. You don't ignore red flags just because something looks good on the surface. You don't force yourself to stay in situations that don't feel right just to keep the peace. You start setting boundaries, not aggressively but intentionally. You choose what aligns with you and what doesn't. And sometimes trusting your intuition means walking away without having all the answers. That can be uncomfortable. We like certainty. We like clear explanations, but not every situation will give you that. Sometimes all you have is a feeling, and that has to be enough, not because it's perfect, but because it's honest. Over time, the more you listen to your intuition, the stronger it becomes. You begin to recognize it more easily. You start to trust it without needing constant confirmation, and that trust changes how you move through life. You become more grounded, more aware, more confident in your decisions, even when they're not easy. People who ignore their intuition often find themselves repeating the same patterns, getting into the same types of situations, dealing with the same kinds of people, facing the same outcomes. Not because they're unaware, but because they don't act on what they feel. They sense it, but they override it. And that creates a disconnect between what they know and what they do. Trusting your intuition closes that gap. It aligns your awareness with your actions. It helps you make decisions that feel right, not just look right. And that alignment brings a different kind of peace, the kind that doesn't come from everything being perfect, but from knowing you're being honest with yourself. At the end of the day, your intuition is one of the most personal tools you have. It's shaped by your experiences, your observations, your understanding of the world. No one else can fully access it or define it for you. That's why trusting it matters. Because when you learn to listen to that inner voice and act on it with clarity and intention, you stop relying on guesswork and you start moving with purpose. Not every trap deserves your energy. That's a hard truth to accept, especially when something feels personal, when it feels targeted, when it looks like a direct challenge to who you are. Your first instinct might be to respond, to defend, to prove something. But the reality is, not everything that comes your way is meant to be fought. Some things are meant to be seen, understood, and then left alone. A trap doesn't always look obvious. It can come in the form of an argument that goes nowhere, a comment designed to provoke you, a situation that keeps pulling you back into the same cycle. It might feel like you need to engage, like walking away means you're weak or avoiding the issue. But that's not always true. Sometimes engaging is exactly what the trap is counting on. Think about it. Traps are built on reaction. They rely on you stepping in, getting involved, investing your time and emotions. Once you're in, it becomes harder to step back. You start explaining yourself, defending your position, trying to fix something that was never meant to be resolved. And slowly, without realizing it, your energy gets drained. That's why recognizing the trap is only the first step. The real power comes in deciding not to engage, in choosing not to give your time, your focus, your peace to something that doesn't deserve it. And that choice requires discipline, because walking away is not always easy. It can feel uncomfortable, it can feel like unfinished business, but not everything needs closure from you. When you start protecting your energy, your perspective changes. You begin to ask different questions. Instead of, how do I respond to this? You ask, is this even worth responding to? Instead of trying to win every situation, you start choosing which situations are worth your attention in the first place, and that shift alone can save you from a lot of unnecessary stress. There's also a level of self-respect in this. You're recognizing that your time and energy have value, that not every opinion needs your reaction, not every conflict needs your participation, not every situation deserves your presence. And once you truly understand that, you stop feeling obligated to engage with everything that comes your way. It's important to realize that ignoring a trap is not the same as being unaware of it. You see it, you understand it, you recognize what it's trying to do, but you choose not to step into it. That's not weakness, that's control. Because you're not acting out of impulse, you're acting out of awareness. And yes, there will be moments when people don't understand your silence or your distance. They might think you're avoiding, or that you don't have an answer, or that you've backed down. But their interpretation doesn't define your reality. You know why you made that choice. You know what it saved you from. Over time, this approach changes how others interact with you. People who are used to pulling you into unnecessary situations will start to realize it doesn't work anymore. They may try different ways at first, pushing harder, testing your boundaries, but when they see that you're consistent, that you don't engage the way you used to, they either adjust or they move on. And that's the point. You're not responsible for maintaining dynamics that drain you. You're not required to participate in every conflict or respond to every challenge. Sometimes the strongest move is simply not to play. That doesn't mean you avoid everything. There are moments that do require your voice, your presence, your action, but the difference now is that you choose those moments carefully. You don't get pulled in, you step in with intention, and that makes your energy more focused, more effective, more aligned with what actually matters to you. Protecting your energy also gives you more space for what's important. Your goals, your growth, your peace of mind. These things require attention too. And if you're constantly spending your energy on traps and distractions, you have less left for what truly moves your life forward. At the end of the day, not every trap deserves your energy, because not every situation deserves your involvement. Just because something is there doesn't mean it's yours to handle. Just because someone throws something your way doesn't mean you have to catch it. You have the choice to let it pass. And in that choice, there's freedom. Freedom from unnecessary stress, unnecessary conflict, unnecessary noise. You start moving with intention instead of reaction. You stop giving your energy away and start using it where it actually makes a difference.